We will take this first discussion in English, and it will follow naturally on many of the valuable points raised by both Janez and Pekka earlier on. And we have the advantage, Janez, you heard, Minna is a professor at the Aalto University, which is specializing in responsible management and responsible business. So please join me at the table. Please, Janez, come on. And we have heard about the challenges, the pressures, the problems. Now, there are evident pressures to really come up with new solutions, and that will change the role of different actors in society. Where do you see really the changing actors? Which are the key actors to change, and how should they change? Do you have? Start?
Shall I start?
You start.
Okay, I start with a grassroots perspective because I think that Janez is going to go to the more higher levels. And one of the very interesting developments that I see are the sustainability enterprises, by which I mean enterprises that are not only looking at their financial profits, but which are also trying to pursue environmental goals and often social goals at the same time. And this goes a bit hand in hand with a general, almost a boom on startups and small enterprises beginning. What I also see that is interesting sprouting development is the sharing economy or collaborative consumption models or business models, if you wish, by which I mean the increasing attempts that are made possible by ICTs and social media, where people are increasingly sharing different types of goods with each other in different ways. Airbnb would be one example, or sharing mobility forms would be another. I also think that decentralized small-scale economy models where farms or households are simultaneously producers and consumers, so-called prosumer models, are interesting developments, as well as the new business models in more of the established incumbent industry side, where services are being introduced in order to make more efficient use of materials and energy and water and so on.
Yeah. That echoes some of the points you raised in your presentation, but do you see from the Brussels perspective that this is where the hope comes for Europe as well?
I think that in essence, without combining the top-down and bottom-up approach, you cannot manage. So you need on one hand the political leadership. One of the things which is fundamentally crucial, I just barely mentioned it, is integration of the policies, which means it's a bit like the concept of preventing the disease or curing the disease.
Right.
So integration of the policy, it's preventing the disease. And when you are in the phase where you already have to cure the disease, first it's more costly, and second you are ill. So I think it's pretty obvious what is better. So integration of the policies means if you design all the policies which have any way of influence on environmental consequences, which is pretty much everything, starting from economic, transport, energy, agriculture, fisheries, transport, continuing to R&D, development policy, trade policy, whatever basically you touch has huge consequences on the overall outcome. You have to design those policies with sustainability in mind. Then the second thing, if we would go bottom up, what I have learned is that, and you know it better than I do, that a lot of those initiatives, without really taking care of the initiatives which are coming from the business sector and which are coming from the civil society, which are happening on the level of the cities, mayors, and so on, you can actually not move the things. So I remember when we were in Rio, if I would do the summary at the end, my summary would be that it was us politicians who were lagging behind. And it was basically the business sector and the civil society which was ahead. And many of very valuable ideas comes from those roots, which we should better incorporate. If we think for the future development in the means of implementation which are needed, for example, for the change which we are now globally doing from the Millennium Development Goals to the Sustainable Development Goals.
Right.
In Millennium Development Goals, it was basically official development aid, help from developed to the developing part of the world. If we want to do the change in the area of Sustainable Development Goals, it's first and foremost the developed part of the world, the change which needs to happen
Right.
here. It's the financial needs inside our governments and our policies. It's absolutely taking business sector on board, because without them in the leading, so their investment, their ideas and so on, innovation, technology. And finally, of course, also international cooperation, but international cooperation in the broadest sense, which means all the trade, all techno transfer, R&D cooperation, and on the top of that also official development aid. So it's much more complex than basically looks, but as you all know, our lives are complex, so it's difficult to simplify it.
No way around it, no.
No way around it, yes.
Okay. There was a lot of mentioning of these kind of experiments, and the results you, Minna, mentioned are also driven by a sort of enthusiasm for making these kind of experiments. But do you see what kind of experiments would really change the discourse? Do you see some specific type of experiments that would really bring home the message to the sort of establishment, if you like?
I think that one of my favorite part of experiments that I would like to see more is actually relating to taxation and subsidiaries. And of course, I mean, there are experiments on the business side, but I see that, okay, they are happening, but how then, if we are now here in the annual or the 20th anniversary of SYKE, and we are also looking at things from the side of policy and regulation, I think that that I would like to see taxation being shifted from taxing labor to taxing environmental burden. And I know that I'm not alone with this opinion, but I think that you can't make a big change immediately, and therefore I think that this would be a very good area for experiments. So what I would really love to see is, for instance, experiments around value-added tax based on carbon footprints of products, or lowering value-added tax on environmentally labeled products. Of course, the label would have to be reliable, not on any label. Or I would like to see tax reductions for investments which are lowering carbon footprints. Or I could also like to see experiments around lower social security costs for green jobs. And I know that all of these are, it's easy to say that these are too difficult, that then it all gets very complicated, and how do you measure what is a green job, and so on and so forth. But I still think that that there should be some sort of experiments toward those kinds of directions.
Mm-hmm. Do you, Janez, see prospects for that kind of experimenting, other than that taking care in Cayman Island?
These are not experiments. This should be real life.
Yeah.
And if you want to have the clearest economic argument for that change, if in economic theory is something is abundant and you have the unemployment like we have, so we have too much of the labor, then you do not tax that resource much, but you basically try to lower the tax so that you increase the employment rate. And if something is in shortage, like resources are, then of course you have to give the signal to all of us that we should use it less. And that's why you tax it. Both have at the same time also the good consequence that basically it's bringing sustainability into the picture. Social sustainability and environmental sustainability. And that I was absolutely behind that idea, but as you said it, it's not easy to, from the EU side, you know that the tax systems, vast majority of the whole policy making is in the hands of the member states.
Exactly.
And if it's in the hands of the member states, then it's in the hands of the member states.
That's a very polite way of saying it. And this is also maybe one of the greetings to the incoming government at one point. But how do you then, if we think of these kind of experiments, that how would you multiply them either across member states or from within the member state, upscale them or so? And do you see that the companies would respond positively, or would it be like a confusion among the companies that nothing is stable, there's everything changing all the time?
Well, of course, this is what is always the complaint when something is being changed, that it's not stable. But I think that you should have a vision, like a political goal, that this is the direction, and then the experiments would make sense if you introduce them toward a certain vision. And I think that in general there should be. I think that again we all agree, and it's difficult, but more like evidence-based policy making, and in that area also the publicity and the visibility of those toward those experiments and their results, I think is really a very crucial part, and somehow connecting politicians perhaps a little bit earlier on to the experiment, so that they not only receive the results,
right,
but are also part of the process.
There is one fundamental thing, because we live always in economic reality. How you introduce them. If you have a shortage in the budget and you then introduce environmental taxes, of course everybody will hate them. Yeah. So because it's additional taxation, and everybody hates additional taxation. But if you introduce them practically in good times, so that you exchange some of the taxes for another taxes and explain also the logic which plays behind, then of course it's much, much easier. And I think it's absolutely necessary that this is introduced in that way, because if you introduce it in the first way, you create just the opposite sentiment in public like you wanted to create. That basically people start to see that as an additional burden and real additional cost and so on. And then you might lock in a situation that also in the future you will have real political problems how to deal with that in reality.
That is perhaps one of the examples that Pekka Haavisto raised, was the Natura 2000. That is one of these legacies that carried on for a long time once you have started with an experiment on the wrong foot, if you like. So I think that's a very important point. Where do you see, Minna, really still, except for this kind of experimenting with the policy, the also other untapped resources when it comes to changing the structures, bringing forward the change?
Untapped resources. I think that there are quite a lot of what I would call like perverse subsidies at play. For instance, if I look at the figures from International Energy Agency of how much more fossil fuels are being subsidized versus renewables, it's almost like 15% goes to renewables versus over 400 billion USD worth of money goes to fossil fuels. So and also in Finland, I think that we put something like 3 billion euro to environmentally burdensome activity subsidiaries. So I would take from there. I think that these are kind of one type of untapped resources, and try to shift them more towards supporting activities that are according to the circular economy. Yeah. And I don't know if this is untapped. I'm going to suggest something else as well. But the industry association's role in this whole game of how we make the change, I think it's really crucial. What is happening at the moment to a great extent is that industry associations are kind of lobbying for the advantages of those who are more of the laggards than of those who are the leading companies, the more sustainable change makers. And what I would like to see is the change of that role of industry associations into something which is kind of innovator, producer, and lobbyists for the sustainability change. And I think that it would make a lot of sense from the perspective of many European countries industries, because we have a lot of capacity there to bring innovations.
Okay, that was a signal. We have 2 minutes left, so
just maybe to,
yes,
but it will be pretty much the same message which I gave before. Subsidies is public money, and according to the definition, it should be used for public purpose because it's public money. Why many times we are not removing the subsidies which are currently in the position? Because in many cases they are connected with less developed regions, and you create additional unemployment. So like with any transition, if you want that it's successful, you have to take care for the people who are losing. You have to give them the vision of opportunities. You have to help them that transition is easier for them. If we don't do that, in reality, I agree 100% with the logic, but in practice you can't implement it. And then you have the problem. Exactly. And that's why this is with the subsidies. This is the core reason why the subsidies are there, why everybody I have ever spoke agrees that environmentally harmful subsidies should be removed. But even in the days now, when it's the most logical, where we have budgetary problems and this would create additional benefit or less cost to the budget, we are not still doing it. The reason it's behind this, because it's socially costly, because it's difficult, and because you need to find alternatives and show the alternatives. Otherwise, transition is simply not possible.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I think that concludes nicely. It comes back to the role, the important role of different actors and the need for cooperation among the actors, seeing that, as you say, sparring the front runners, but at the same time keeping in mind that those who lose need to be helped and not left alone. So thank you very much for your points of view. We will hand over to the ecosystem services people, and let's hope that they find the solutions to really getting the new initiatives going. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.